Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, where today we are embarking on a reading vlog. So for the month of April, I decided to go ahead and do a DNF project. Essentially, I was looking at my Goodreads TBR shelf and I realized there are so many books on my shelf that I'm interested in, but there's something about it that I'm just like not sure that I'm going to like, whether it's like an author I've read before, but they've also burned me in the past, or it's a genre I don't read too much of anymore, especially like YA fantasy. There's a lot of YA fantasy and I don't read YA fantasy so much anymore. Or like there's something about the premise that's just giving me pause. These things that are kind of potential DNFs, they're more likely to be DNFs, right? And so I decided to do a project in April where I try one of these potential DNFs every day. Now, here's the thing. Try means to get to 50 pages, unless I know for sure before that I don't want to read it anymore. So usually I try to get to 50 pages and then like evaluate. But if I'm hating life or I'm hating reading it before that, then I will just go ahead and DNF it. And I'm aiming for every day, although realistically that's not going to happen either because like, first of all, if I actually end up liking it, I'm just going to finish the book, but that means I'm probably not going to like attempt another one the next day just in case. So I'm not in the middle of a million books. But also just because I don't necessarily read every day. So I'm going to aim for every day so that I work hard to try a bunch, but it's probably not going to happen every day. I don't know. The other thing that I'm actually hoping for is that as I kind of get through the most likely candidates and I start requesting more books from the library, especially, I'm going to get a bunch of stuff where I realize, oh, I don't actually want to try that. Or, oh, I can't actually get that from my library. And then I just delete them. So I'm hopeful that I'm going to end up trying things, but also realizing I don't want to try things. That's kind of the hope for this whole thing. And I'm going to vlog the experience because if this goes well, I'm going to have a ton of books that I'm DNFing, or I have a ton of books that I end up reading because they're actually really good. But either way, there's going to be probably a lot of books. And so trying to remember why I DNF things, especially if I end up DNFing it very quickly, it gets really muddled. So I figured this is probably going to be a better way to do it. I'll just check in. I'm going to try to check in after I DNF every book, so that I can tell you like what the book is and why I DNF'd it. Hopefully that part goes well. But yeah, then I just wanted to let you know what this reading vlog is all about. But that's all I have. So I will check in again once I have DNF'd my very first book. So it is now April 2nd, and I have DNF'd my very first book, and it is Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. It's a YA fantasy. Our main character is Sal, who's a thief and really wants to join the little group of assassins that work for the queen. I don't think they're just assassins, but that is some of what they do. And there's an opening, so Sal decides to go try out, and it's like one of those things where like they admire the queen, but also they want to get close to like the nobles to maybe try to kill them. But there's a tryout kind of thing, and they get there only to find out it's like a battle to the death, which they are not prepared for. So yeah, story goes from there. And that sounds interesting, but what I found was that it's got some issues. And what my problem is that for certain genres, especially YA fantasy and urban fantasy, I've read so much in those genres that my bar is so high for wanting to read it. Either it has to be really, really well written, or it has to be a really unique concept. And this was not really quite hitting the mark on either of those things. Like the beginning first chapter was rushed. Like it was a weird thing where it either needed to be shorter, like a more concise and a prologue, or longer and a proper first chapter, or even first couple of chapters.
And then like the writing, like sentence structure, sometimes the pronouns, I wasn't sure who the pronouns were referring to. And the world building just kind of like was given to us without situating us in like time and space. And so there's a lot of information, but not a lot of context. And so I was like, I'm not going to remember this at pretty much at all. And just like little things like that, which are not generally deal breakers for me in other books, but it is like a negative in YA fantasy. And then because it was so generic, like, or some of it was feeling quite generic, I was just like, at page 22, I was just like, I'm really not feeling it. Like, all I'm noticing are these issues. So I just went ahead and DNF'd it. The next thing, I don't know when I'm going to try it, but the next thing that I am likely to pick up is All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace, which is another YA fantasy, so we'll see how it goes. Wish me luck.
And it is now April 5th, and I have DNF'd another book, and that is All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace, which is a young adult fantasy. So in this book, we are following our main character, who is the one and only child of the king of this island nation. And in this island nation, there is magic, and each island has a different kind of magic. And their island, and specifically the royal line, are the only ones that are able to do soul magic. And so our main character, it's her 18th birthday, and she has to go give this performance basically of soul magic to prove that she is qualified to be the next ruler of this kingdom. Only it goes horribly awry, and the story goes from there. I DNF'd this at page 26, I believe. And here's the thing. Again, we're back to YA fantasy. It doesn't necessarily do it for me. But what I will say about this book is that it is pretty atmospheric. It's vibes heavy. It's not, from what I can tell, it's not going to be all vibes, no plot, but it is pretty vibes heavy, very atmospheric. Even I can tell, and I'm not always the best at being able to tell that kind of stuff. And a lot of times, if it's very atmospheric, it doesn't always work for me anyway. And I just generally didn't like the main character. She's arrogant, understandably so, and she's got that teenage thing of, I want to know all the information, and I want to all the rights, but I don't necessarily understand all the responsibilities that come with knowing all that information and having all those rights, which like is a little irritating. And also just the general storyline of this person who thinks she's going to get everything is kind of getting smacked back down to earth and has to like figure out how to go from here. That's not necessarily a story that genuinely interests me as much anymore. So I just went ahead and DNF'd it at 26. So the next thing that I picked up is Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is adult fantasy following Jebi, who is taking a test with the Ministry of Art to try to get a job there, but the ministry in charge of the military instead recruits them to paint symbols in automata. Only Jebi realizes that actually there is some hinky things going on, and they have to decide what they're going to do going forward. I'm 22 pages into this, and actually it's going okay. So this is one where either I'm going to finish it or I'm going to DNF it like closer to like 100 pages in. But so far, so good. So that is where I am at. I will check in again when I have another update. It is now April 9th, and I have decided to go ahead and DNF Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. As predicted, I DNF'd it at page 97. And the thing is that the way it's written is fine. There's like no major problems with the writing or the characters or anything like that. It just wasn't what I was liking. So like, it's the kind of stuff that I don't normally gravitate towards. And as I was reading it, I was realizing that this is probably going to be a 3 to 3.5 star book. And like,
I'm okay with 3 to 3.5 star books if it's for quality reasons, but I'm really enjoying it in spite of the quality issues. But when the quality is fine and I'm just not enjoying it, like, that doesn't really work for me as much. And I'm much more likely to DNF those, as I did in this particular case. It's not that I was disliking it. It was that I was more indifferent. So like when I flipped to the back to see how many pages there were, I accidentally got caught up in reading some of it. I read like a couple paragraphs where there were like truly astounding, like earth-shattering discoveries that I made, and I didn't really care so much. So that really sealed the deal, and so I just went ahead and DNF'd it. I did feel a little bit conflicted about it, but honestly, I'm trying not to read things that I know are going to be 3 to 3.5 stars for reasons of I just am not enjoying it as much. So the next thing that I am going to pick up is Raybearer by Jordan Flecko. Now, I know that this is young adult fantasy, and I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember exactly what it's about, but it's young adult fantasy. And I have heard really good things about it, but mostly from people who like whose opinions don't necessarily align with mine. And so it's not like I can trust their recommendation because it doesn't necessarily apply to me. But yeah, young adult fantasy has not been going well in this particular vlog so far. So I don't know how this is going to go, but that's what I will be trying next. And I will update you again whenever I have something new to add. So it is now April 14th, and I just realized that I haven't actually updated you, even though I've been reading other books and DNFing other books. I just forgot that I was doing this project. So we have a couple things to talk about. First and foremost is Raybearer by Jordan Flecko. This is YA fantasy. Our main character is like kind of, I think, cursed by her mother to basically, she has to go and try to get in to the council to the prince so that she can get close to the prince so she can fall in love with the prince. And then when she does, she's supposed to kill the prince. And the story kind of goes from there. And I did DNF this. I made it 35 pages, but what I realized was that it just wasn't working for me in the way that like YA fantasy just isn't working for me. So nothing bad against this book. Like I did have some quibbles about some things, but it was like very nitpicky. If you're interested in this book, you should definitely give it a shot. This is not me saying like it's bad at all. I'm saying like I am so over YA fantasy that this did not work. Yeah, 35 pages, a little bittersweet because I could actually tell that if I had read this when it came out, I would have enjoyed it. So I have feelings about that, and that I do find that very unfortunate, but I went ahead and DNF'd it anyway. And then the next thing I picked up was Dark Shores by Danielle L. Jensen. This is also a YA fantasy. Our main character is a sailor, like on a merchant ship. And there's only one rule for the merchants, and that is East does not meet West. Like there's two different land masses, and like they're very separated, and they don't really know about each other. They kind of, it's been so long since they've like done anything together that they kind of think it's myth at this point. Anyway, our main character's best friend ends up betrothed to this kind of awful guy, and so our main character decides to break the one rule and smuggle her friend on board to take her to the other continent, I guess. And the story goes from there. I DNF'd this somewhere around page 25 because, again, YA fantasy, it just really wasn't working for me. And this one is a little bit more Roman inspired or Greek inspired. I get them mixed up. But like that ancient Greece, ancient Rome kind of vibe. And I was not feeling it at all. I don't think I've ever read a book that is inspired by ancient Rome, ancient Greece that I've actually liked. It just doesn't work for me anyway. And so in addition to it being YA fantasy with those particular story elements, that is specific to YA fantasy, I just went ahead and DNF'd it. And then I picked up Blaze Wrath Games by Amparo Ortiz, and this is also a YA fantasy, but we're following our main character of Lana, who was born in Puerto Rico, but she now lives in Florida, and she is very interested in trying out for the Blaze Wrath Games, which is an athletic competition, but there's dragons, because we're living in an alternate Earth that has dragons and magic. And she manages to get a spot on the team, but it feels very off, and there's a lot of things happening in the world that are not great, and the story kind of goes from there. And this is another one I DNF'd. I made it to 47 pages in. And this is another one where the quality is actually there. I have some very small nitpicky quibbles, but honestly, the quality is there. I'm just not feeling a lot of these story elements that kind of go into YA fantasy. So, I made it to page 47, and I realized again, like, it's not that I think that it's bad. I just am a little bit indifferent to what's happening on the page. So, yeah, I DNF'd it. So now I have to pick my next book that I'm going to try, and I'm sorry. I do have to talk about one more thing. I did actually also try Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade, and I finished it. I actually read the whole thing. I have some very definite feelings about it. I'm not going to get into it here. I have very mixed feelings because I think that the first 2/3 of the book do not match with the last third tonally. And for me, that was a big enough difference that I really struggled with it. I think that there was a lot of good things going on in this book, but I did have some issues. If you're interested in it, I will talk more in depth about it in my wrap up for this month. But yeah, I did finish it. I gave it 3.5 stars. And so, but I did attempt it as part of this project. So I wanted to mention it. So moving into what I'm going to try next, and I'm not sure. So the most likely candidate is probably going to be The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning, which is a YA fantasy, but also this is a YA fantasy that is like a reimagination of The Princess Bride, and so it's going to be either amazing or hot garbage, and I'm hoping for amazing, so I'm still going to give it a try. But I think that that's probably going to be the thing that I pick up because I'm currently in the middle of A Local Habitation by Shannon McGuire, which is a October Day book. And it's kind of, October Day is kind of urban fantasy noir. And so some of the other books I have, I think it's going to be too close to that. But like The Princess Will Save You is like straight up YA fantasy. So like that'll probably work better. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be the next thing that I pick up. But that's it for now. Hopefully I will remember to actually update you when I actually DNF the next book, or if I finish it, I'll let you know. But that's it for now.
It is now April 18th, multiple days later. So yes, I do have multiple things to talk about. I mean, I was going to try to update you as soon as I had something, but it was over Easter weekend, so that didn't happen. So now we have multiple things to talk about, starting with The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning. And I don't remember exactly what I said last clip, but it's like YA fantasy, homage to The Princess Bride kind of thing. I did DNF this. I made it to page about 35. I didn't write down the exact page number, but it was right around page 35. I read through this very impassioned speech that our main character gave that was also incredibly naive to the point of being kind of stupid. It was one of those things where I was reading it and it was like, oh, you're making a lot of really good points, but how you're making them is very naive and just, you're not going to get the intended results because like, it's just half baked. Your argument is half baked. It's like, sit down, like think through your arguments before you do this. And so it's just like, I don't know. So I read through the next chapter as well, but then she was very judgmental and like, oh, all of these princes that are trying to like get my hand in marriage are awful, but like doesn't follow up with like how they're awful. It was a whole lot of like telling and not showing. And so I was just like, nah, I think I'm done. So yes, around page 35. That's how far I made it. And then I went ahead and picked up Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Rai. And this is a contemporary romance. It's the second in a series, but I didn't read the first. But this is a bodyguard romance, essentially. We have our main character who is a former model and is very, very anonymous right now. And essentially her bodyguard, he's been her bodyguard for many, many years. And she's got the hots for him. And turns out he's got the hots for her too. But there's that whole like, they have to breach the like employee-employer kind of line that they have. And actually, when I first started, I did DNF this, except I didn't DNF it until page like 134, I think. So I made it quite a ways in because in the beginning, I was very, very into this. I loved how like sweet and like this romance was playing it. Just, it was very much working for me until we got into the bodyguard's head, Jasvinder. We got into his head and you can tell that like I think the author was going for kind of a Jazz has had this crush for a really long time, has had these feelings for a really long time and doesn't know how to deal with them, doesn't really know how to deal with emotions. But like how she wrote it, how the author wrote it, it kind of crossed the line into like weird, a little creepy kind of territory. Like it was actually, okay, so I'm going to tell you about this one scene. So there is a part where, okay, she gets live tweeted for this meet cute in the cafe between her and this other random dude. And she's like freaking out because then maybe she's not going to remain anonymous. And that's like how she's dealt with various issues in her life. So Jazz decides, okay, Katrina, I will take you out to this very secluded country home that I happen to own. and nobody knows it exists. So you should be very safe, very anonymous out there. Well, they drive through the night to get there and she passes out in the bed. And he kind of looks in, is like taking care of other things and notices like she's still wearing her shoes. So he's like, oh, well, I don't want her to be uncomfortable and wake up. Like, that's not good. So he goes in to take off her shoes and dude is freaking out because he's touching her bare ankle to take off her shoe. Like, he's feeling guilty about it. And he's just like, I'll have to leave her socks on because I would feel pervy stripping wool off of bare flesh. And like I think I will always remember that phrase because it's so ridiculous. And because I sent a picture of this to a friend and she's just like, stripping wool off of bare flesh, sir, it is a sock. And it was like, yes, that is the best sum up of how weird this guy is. And I read a little bit past that point, but he never quite calmed down. I skipped ahead to read like the sex scene to see how that was handled. And it was also very like fumbling teenager, even though they're not teenagers. And I was like, I don't think this is it. I don't think this is it for me. So I went ahead and DNF'd it at page 134. And so like, which is actually really sad, by the way, because again, I really liked her perspective and I was really into this, but then like, he was just across the line for me. So now I am currently reading Fortune Favors the Dead by Stephen Spotswood. This is a historical, a 1940s mystery with two women leads. I think both are queer, but and then it's like a Sherlock Holmes and Watson kind of retelling, homage, something like that. I am now, let's see, I'm on page 30.
And this is kind of a weird one because there's aspects of it that I really, really like. And I'm into, and then there's aspects of it that I'm just really not into. And some of it is like how language is used in the writing is like little irritants kind of thing. And then just like, it's a lot of little irritants so far. So I'm on page 30, and I guess it's not a lot of little irritants, but there are little irritants. And so it's one of those things. I'm on page 30. I'm going to keep going. I'll reevaluate at page 50. I'll probably reevaluate again at 75. Like, I'm just going to keep reevaluating to see, like, am I getting irritated with this? Because it's a writing style thing. And so, like, I don't know if I'm assuming that it's not going to get better, and I don't know how my tolerance of it is going to be. I don't know. Like, I am still hopeful that this could work, but like with every passing page, that hope dims a little bit, just because how it's trying really hard to be 1940s, but it doesn't always feel authentic, which is a little weird to say because it's not like I was around for the 1940s, but it doesn't feel quite right. And so I'm not sure if I'll be able to get past that or not. So we shall see. But that is it for this update. And it is now April 21st, and I have multiple books to update you on. I have been in a real kick about actually like trying these books out. So, we're just going to go with it. But first up, Fortune Favors the Dead by Stephen Spotswood. I DNF'd it at page 48. It really was trying too hard. There were issues with how language was being used in general. And then we had this really weird plot point where like the clients are like, everybody's saying that the ghost of my dad killed my mother. And I was just like, you know what? I don't even know if you believe this, or I don't need it. I don't need it. And so I went ahead and DNF'd it. And then I picked up Mirage by Sumaya Dayoud, and this is a sci fantasy, a YA sci fantasy. I believe the first in a series, but we are following our main character who's going to be conscripted into being a body double for I think a princess, essentially. And things are going to go from there. And I didn't make it very far. I only made it 22 pages in, primarily because I did not like the writing style. I just really wasn't vibing with the writing style. I was struggling to get through it a little bit. And so I read, I think, like 2 or 3 chapters, and I was just like, I don't want to work this hard for like this writing style that I'm just not vibing with. So I went ahead and DNF'd it. And then I DNF'd Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, which is a young adult urban fantasy romance. Essentially, we're following our main character of Yadriel, and Yadriel is trying to prove that he is worthy of being a brujo. Now, the magical community, is maybe not quite on board because Yadriel is trans, and they're like, but you might be a bruja. So like it's one of those kinds of situations. So Yadriel is like, I am going to go do the brujo ceremony and prove to everybody that in the eyes of Santa Muerte that I am a brujo. And things go badly and his cousin dies, and he accidentally summons Julian, which is the ghost of a classmate that just died recently. So now Yadriel has to figure out what's going on with Miguel and what happened to Miguel. And Julian is like, I'm not leaving until I do some things. I got some unfinished business. And so they have to team up to do those things, and sparks fly. And this is just one of those things where I only made it 18 pages in. I read 1 chapter. As a side note, I do have a problem with longer chapters. Like the first chapter is 18 pages and the second chapter is like 22 pages. And I think that's just too long.
Apart from that, though, I just really wasn't feeling it. And I don't have any concrete reason why. It was just one of those things where I read the first chapter and I put it down. And then I had multiple opportunities to pick it up, and I just decided not to. And so I really thought maybe I just picked it up at the wrong time and I should maybe soft DNF it and like come back to it later. And I pretty quickly realized that if I soft DNF it, I'm never coming back to it. I'm just like so uninterested. So I went ahead and just DNF'd it at page 18. So what I'm going to pick up next, I am most likely to pick up Acting on Impulse by Mia Sosa, which is an adult contemporary romance. I tried to read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, and I DNF'd that. So that's why I'm like on edge about this one. But I might also have a hold coming in. So if that comes in, then I'm going to read that first. Maybe. We'll see. This is the most likely thing, but there's possibly other things. And I'm kind of slowing down on how much I'm requesting from the library because we only have like 9 days left. And so I don't know how much more I'm going to be able to do, but hopefully I can get through like 3 or 4 more potential DNFs. But that is where we are right now. That's all I have for this update. It is now May 2nd, and I just realized that I didn't actually finish updating you on all the books that I DNF'd. So here we go. I only have one more book that I DNF'd in the month of April, and that is The Tiger at Midnight by Swati Tirthala, which is a YA fantasy. It's the first in a series, and I don't exactly remember the description because I DNF'd it a week and a half ago. But essentially, this is a story that has world building based in, I believe, Indian stories or maybe Hindu mythology, something very similar to that. I'll leave it a link down below to Storygraph, so if you want to check out the full description, you can. But our main female character is an assassin, and she ends up running into our main male character who is a guard, and they're on opposite sides, but I think they have to work together, kind of thing. And the story goes from there. But I DNF'd this in around page 35, mostly because this is a book where I, as I was reading it, I could see the shape of the story to come. Now, based off of the description, I might not actually be accurate in what I think that story is going to be, but I also just found I didn't really care. And especially because these two characters, the male character, the female character, meet up in the very beginning in like the chapters that I read, and there's just a very strong romantic element there, and I'm just not generally into YA fantasy. So it wasn't bad, it's just definitely not for me, and I figured that I probably wasn't necessarily going to enjoy reading it, so I went ahead and DNF'd it. So that means that in the month of April, I attempted 13 different books and I DNF'd 12 of them. And this is really great. Like I am really appreciative of this. Even more interesting to this is that I deleted probably another 20 books off of my Goodreads just without reading them. Because I was looking at it going, I'm actually not that interested in this. Or it's a YA fantasy and I'm struggling with YA fantasy. Or okay, I want to read this, and then I go to my library and I can't get a hold of it. So between all of those things, I deleted probably another 20 books off of my Goodreads TBR list. So I'm much closer to the 200 mark rather than the 250 mark, which is really, really nice. I'm very happy about it. However, I am realizing that this is a project that is much larger in scope than I thought, because I thought it was going to be 80 books. About 80 books, and it's not. That's just the 80 books where I was actively wary. There's a number of other books that I looked at and I'm like, I'm not wary, but I'm not that interested in it either. Like, I just don't have a ton of feelings towards it. And I think that it might be good, but also might be bad, so including those, it's a much, much larger project. So it's going to end up being an ongoing thing where I regularly try things from my Goodreads TBR in an attempt to like bring the number of books on my Goodreads TBR down to a much more manageable number. But that is it. That is every book that I tried, and most of them I did end up DNFing. If you have any thoughts or feelings about any of the books that I DNF'd, or spoiler alert, which is the one book that I did finish, leave me a comment down below. But that is it. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to, and until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.